value of wetland areas in the province and around the world is obvious from an aesthetic and environmental perspective. But it turns out there's even more going on here than was once realized, if you look a little below the surface.
This is vegetation material that's been added to the ground surface, but because the wetlands are cold and wet most of the time, that material doesn't break down, and so it accumulates. And so we can have 2, 3, 4 meters of peat below the ground surface in these wetlands, and that peat is about 90% carbon.
Carbon being stored in peat means it isn't being released into the atmosphere. And now researchers at the Saskatchewan Research Council are working to determine just how big of an impact wetland areas have in protecting the environment in this manner.
We understand carbon in upland forests pretty well because people have been looking at that for a long time. But carbon in wetlands is less well understood because they're more difficult to operate in and get access to. Plus, they generally speaking don't have a lot of commercial forestry value, so people just aren't there very much.
1, 2, 3. Good.
The SRC has been working with Ducks Unlimited and the Sustainable Forestry Initiative, as well as 2 forestry companies and Brandon University, to examine wetlands in western Manitoba.
We're purposely sampling a wide variety of different kinds of wetlands, from some that are relatively dry with a lot of tree cover on it to others that are mostly wet and only have grass cover in them because they're too wet for trees. So we're sampling across a range of different conditions, trying to represent those different kinds of wetlands.
Measurements have been taken using thin fiberglass rods to estimate the depth of peat at about 60 different wetland areas.
What we want to do is develop what we're calling a rapid assessment protocol that will allow foresters, who are not necessarily wetland experts, to be able to go out and collect data on carbon in wetlands so that they have a better feeling for how much is out there and how that might relate to carbon in other parts of their landscapes.
The results will be analyzed over the next several months, and the team is working on a guidebook that will allow organizations and companies to do their own carbon measurements. Of course, the ultimate goal is to encourage the protection of these areas.
To really emphasize the value of wetlands and the need to conserve wetlands because of their importance as a large carbon reservoir, keeping it out of the atmosphere, but also the fact that wetlands are hotspots of biodiversity. There are species of plants and animals that occur in wetlands that don't occur anywhere else.
In Saskatoon, I'm Simon Hiatt reporting.